CBC News has learned more about the suspect in custody, Alek Minasьyan. Here's what may have motivated him. Our senior investigative correspondent, Diana Swain, has been looking into that angle. And Diana, what have you learned?
Well, as you said, there's no indication so far that authorities have that this was motivated by terrorism or by political views. Why then? So here's what we've learned so far about the man behind the wheel and what might have motivated him to do this. This cell phone video shows the driver as he steps out of the van into the line of a police officer who has his weapon drawn. That driver has now been identified as 25-year-old Alek Minasьyan. Watch as he gestures, appearing to try to provoke the Toronto police officer into firing on him. And listen as he yells at the officer to shoot him. Tonight, Minasьyan is in custody. As police search for a motive, one possible explanation is circulating online, suggesting Minasьyan was angry over being rebuffed by women. In what appears to be a post on Facebook, in which a man with the same name and picture as Minasьyan refers to the Supreme Gentleman, Elliot Rodger.
Hi, Elliot Rodger here.
In fact, Rodger was responsible for a deadly rampage in Isla Vista, California in 2014, killing 6 people and injuring over a dozen more.
Tomorrow is the day of retribution. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity.
A video Rodger posted just beforehand raged about successive women turning down his advances.
All because girls have never been attracted to me.
In that video, men who always seem to win with women were referred to as Chads, Stacys, the women who turned men down, rendering those like Rodger incels or involuntarily celibate. This posting, apparently from Minasьyan, says the incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. CBC News has not been able to independently verify the post as being made by Minasьyan. There is no indication so far that he targeted any specific person as he plowed down the sidewalk, but rather aimed his vehicle at anyone in his path.
So, Diana, a lot to digest there. Tell us more about what you know in this case.
There's not a whole lot more about him on social media, Ian. What we did find was his LinkedIn profile, in which it says he's a Seneca College student. That's a college here in Toronto. He appears to have been a student there for some time. It says from 2011 to present day, so we're talking 7 years. It seems he was developing an app that would help you find free parking spots in Toronto. Beyond that, based on the footage, we don't believe he was seriously injured in any way as he was taken into custody.
All right, Diana Swain, thank you.
As Diana mentioned there in her piece, a group name that you've probably never heard of before, incels or involuntary celibate. Their brand of conversation has been banned from websites like Reddit. And whether Minasьyan really does count himself amongst those so-called incels isn't confirmed, but what does it mean anyway to brand yourself as one? Ishmael Darrow is a journalist with BuzzFeed who's dug into some of this. Good to see you. So what is this group of people, if you were going to break it down for us?
Well, it's in the name, right? It's involuntarily celibate. These are young people, mostly men, who feel that they have been forced into celibacy, that they haven't had success with women in romantic and sexual relationships. And over time, you know, that can really curdle into some really resentful sentiments about women in general.
And does it, or has it, I guess it has, but does it normally take the form of violence?
Well, I think that for a lot of people, you know, these terms, there's a heavy layer of irony. So it's not uncommon for somebody to, you know, between relationships, maybe to jokingly say, you know, I'm involuntarily celibate. But for people within communities where they very seriously self-identify as that, it is a little more barbed, and there's often very strong anti-woman and anti-feminist language where these young men often feel like they are owed relationships and they're owed sex, and when that doesn't happen, they can get quite angry.
So would you say it's a subgroup sort of marginalized young people, or is it something slightly more dangerous and nefarious?
Well, I think it's impossible to take this out of the larger world of online communities where often young men they might join and not really have their identities totally molded yet. But over time, you see this on communities like Reddit or 4chan. Posting enough and finding this community, it can actually maybe radicalize you further than you even realized when you first joined this group, where you might only have wanted to post some memes or trade some jokes with other young men.
You use the word radicalize, which is an interesting choice of words here. And I wonder, is there chatter tonight about this incident? Is there someone claiming responsibility or the group celebrating in some way?
I think it's still very early and probably too early to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if on some of these darker corners of the web where a certain kind of reactionary politics has developed in the last few years, if you were to look tonight, I think you might see you might see some sympathy. Again, it's very early to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes an icon, sort of like Elliot Rodger became to the same community.
And again, we have not confirmed that this association is there on those web pages that Diana mentioned. Would it surprise you to see that it was, or is this maybe more common than we think?
I think, again, it's too early, but the fact that this post that we're talking about did specifically cite Elliot Rodger, who has become a bit of a strange martyr figure in certain parts of the web, I think you can see that connection.
Okay. Ishmael Darrow, thanks for helping us understand something none of us really knew about until today. Thanks.